Welcome to the first outcome of this unit, where we get to grips with what organization culture actually is and the main models people use to describe it. By the end, you'll be able to talk about culture with the same shared language that managers and researchers use. So, what do we mean by organization culture? At its heart, it's the shared set of values, beliefs, and habits that quietly guide how people behave once they're inside a business. Deal and Kennedy summed it up rather nicely as simply the way we do things around here. Think about walking into a branch of John Lewis, where staff are called partners and go out of their way to help. Nobody hands them a script for that warmth. They pick it up from the people around them. That's culture at work, shaping behavior even when no manager is watching. Let's nail down 3 words we'll lean on throughout. Culture is the whole package of shared values and norms that shapes how members behave. Values are the deeper beliefs about what really matters, things like quality, teamwork, or looking after the customer. Norms are the unwritten rules about how you're expected to act day to day, like the unspoken understanding at pret-a-manger that you greet every customer with genuine friendliness rather than a flat hello. Why should a business care about something so intangible? Because culture feeds straight into motivation, teamwork, decision-making, and the way staff treat customers, and when it fits the company's goals, it can become a real competitive edge. Peter Drucker is often quoted as saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast, meaning even a brilliant plan will stall if the culture works against it. Studying these models gives managers a shared language to describe and compare organizations rather than just saying, a place feels a certain way. Charles Handy, building on earlier work by Roger Harrison, gave us one of the most popular ways of sorting cultures into 4 broad types. Each one has its own structure, its own source of power, and its own distinctive feel, and Handy attached a memorable symbol to each: a web, a Greek temple, a net, and a cluster. Most real organizations turn out to be a blend, but usually with one type clearly dominant. Keep that in mind as we go through them, because you'll often recognize your own workplace in more than one. The first 2 are the power culture and the role culture. In a power culture, pictured as a web, control radiates out from one person or a small group at the center. There are few rules, decisions come quickly, and loyalty counts for a lot, as in a small hedge fund run tightly by its founder. The role culture, pictured as a Greek temple, is the opposite. It's built on rules, procedures, and clearly defined jobs, and your authority comes from the position you hold rather than your personality, much like a post in the civil service. The other 2 are the task culture and the person culture. A task culture, drawn as a net, organizes itself around projects and teams, and power flows to whoever has the expertise the job needs. It's flexible and firmly focused on results, which is why you see it in advertising agencies and software project teams. A person culture, shown as a loose cluster, is more unusual. The organization actually exists to serve the individuals within it, like a group of barristers sharing chambers who pool resources but keep their independence. Let's set the 4 side by side. A power culture has that central web structure, with power sitting in the individual at the center, typical of a small entrepreneurial or family firm. A role culture runs as a hierarchy or temple, where position and rules hold sway, as in a bank or a large insurer. A task culture works through teams or a matrix, drawing its power from knowledge and expertise, like a software project team. And a person culture is a loose cluster built around the individual expert, as you'd find in a barrister's chambers or a GP partnership. Picture a fast-growing UK startup, still run closely by the person who founded it. Most of the big calls are made right at the top, with the founder setting direction and acting quickly because there are no committees to slow things down. Those few formal rules keep the firm nimble and ready to pounce on an opportunity. The catch is obvious, though. The whole thing leans heavily on one individual, so it can struggle to scale or to cope if that person walks away. That's Handy's power, or web culture, in its natural habitat. Now contrast that with a large high street bank, say something on the scale of Lloyd's or Barclays. Work is organized around departments, clear job titles, and detailed procedures, and your authority comes from your grade rather than your force of personality. All those rules and controls exist for good reason. They deliver consistency, keep the bank compliant, and make sure customers' money is handled safely. The trade-off is that it can be slow to change and feel rather bureaucratic. This is Handy's role, or temple, culture, and it's common in banks and public bodies. Here's a distinction that trips a lot of people up. The strength of a culture is about how widely and deeply its values are shared, not whether those values are good. In a strong culture, the values are clear, strongly felt, and shared by almost everyone. So staff tend to just know the right thing to do without being told. In a weak culture, the values are vague. They vary from team to team, and they're only loosely held. A chain like IKEA, where staff everywhere seem to share the same way of working, sits firmly at the strong end. A strong culture brings some real benefits: a clear identity, a shared sense of purpose, greater loyalty and motivation, lower staff turnover, and a consistent experience for customers, plus faster decisions, because everyone already understands what's expected. But there's a flip side. Strong cultures can breed resistance to change, that we've always done it this way mindset, along with groupthink, where nobody wants to challenge the decision in the room. They can also make it hard for newcomers, or anyone a bit different to fit in. And if the shared values happen to be bad ones, a strong culture simply spreads those bad habits faster. Edgar Schein offered a deeper way of looking at culture, comparing it to an iceberg with 3 levels. At the top, above the water, are the artifacts, the visible signs like dress, logos, office layout, and rituals. Just beneath are the espoused values, the goals, mission, and slogans an organization openly claims to stand for. And right down at the bottom sit the basic assumptions, the deep, taken-for-granted beliefs that really drive behavior. The important lesson is that most of a culture is hidden below the waterline. So a trendy office with a slide and a ping-pong table tells you very little on its own. Deal, and Kennedy came at it from a different angle, sorting cultures by 2 things: how much risk is involved and how quickly you get feedback on whether you got it right. Their tough guy or macho culture is high risk with fast feedback. Think of a trading floor where fortunes are made and lost in seconds. Their work hard, play hard culture is low risk but fast feedback, like a busy sales-driven retailer. The bet your company culture takes big risks but waits years to know the outcome, as in aircraft manufacture or pharmaceuticals. And the process culture is low risk with slow feedback, the world of banks and government departments. Now we turn to what actually shapes a culture in the first place, and leaders, especially founders, have the strongest hand of all, particularly in the early years. What a leader chooses to pay attention to reward, and to role model quietly teaches everyone else what really matters. Think of how the tone the late Steve Jobs set at Apple, prizing design and daring, still echoes through the company today. Shine went so far as to argue that creating and managing culture is the single most important task of leadership. An organization's history and its ownership also leave a deep mark. The traditions and past successes of a firm gradually harden into how things are done here, and long-established businesses often carry deep, slow-changing cultures. Ownership matters too. A family firm, a public limited company, and an employee-owned business, like the John Lewis Partnership, each grow very different cultures. And when two firms with different histories merge, you often get a culture clash, which is exactly why so many mergers struggle to deliver what was promised. Size and structure pull culture in fairly predictable directions. Small organizations tend to run on informal power or person cultures, where everyone knows everyone by name. As they grow, they usually bolt on rules, layers, and departments, drifting steadily towards a role culture. A tall, hierarchical structure supports a formal culture, while a flat structure leaves room for a looser, task-based one. It's a familiar story. A startup that once felt relaxed, and even a little chaotic, has to formalize itself as it turns into a large company, and some of that early spark can be lost along the way. The technology a business runs on shapes how people talk to one another and how closely they're controlled. Assembly line or heavily automated work tends to produce structured, rule-based cultures because the process itself sets the pace. Digital and collaborative tools, along with remote working, tend to support more flexible, team-based cultures. Compare a software firm working openly across shared online tools with a call center where every second of a call is monitored, and you can hear how differently those two cultures would sound. The national culture a business sits within matters as well. Geert Hofstede compared countries across dimensions such as power distance, how comfortable people are with unequal power, and individualism, how far people look after themselves rather than the group. The UK, for instance, scores high on individualism, while Japan scores higher on long-term orientation and on avoiding uncertainty. A multinational like Unilever has to adjust its culture and management style from one country to the next, rather than assuming one approach fits all. Nissan's car plant in Sunderland is a lovely real example of several of these forces working at once. Its Japanese parent brought lean production and strong team-working traditions with it, so history and ownership shaped the culture from the start. The highly automated assembly lines encourage a disciplined, standardized way of working, and that's the technology at play. And Japanese ideas such as Kaizen, the habit of continuous improvement, meet British working practices on the factory floor. The result is a distinctive culture forged by leadership, technology, history, and national influences all together. It helps to see how a culture actually takes root over time. It usually begins at the founding, when the early leaders set the original values and priorities. Next comes a period of learning what works, as the group hits on ways of solving problems that succeed and get repeated. Then those ways get passed on, as new staff pick up how we do things through stories, training, and the people they watch. Finally, it embeds, when those values quietly become taken-for-granted assumptions that guide behavior automatically without anyone stopping to think about them. Let's gather up what we've covered. Organization culture is the shared set of values, beliefs, and norms that shape how people behave, the way we do things around here. Charles Handy gave us 4 types: power the web, roll the temple, task the net, and person the cluster. Cultures can be strong or weak depending on how widely their values are shared. Though remember, a strong culture only helps if those values fit the strategy. We also met Shine's 3 levels, and Deal and Kennedy's risk and feedback types, and we saw culture being shaped by leadership, history and ownership, size and structure, technology and national culture. That brings us to the end of the first outcome, where you've built a solid toolkit for describing and comparing the culture of any organization. If you'd like to go deeper, Charles Handy's own Understanding Organizations and Edgar Shine's Organizational Culture and Leadership are the natural next reads, and the CIPD and Hofstede Insights websites are well worth a browse. The Harvard Business Review Guide to Corporate Culture, along with the case studies on firms like Google and the John Lewis Partnership, will help you see these ideas in the wild. Take a look at whichever of these appeals, and you'll be in a strong position for the assignment.